Come one, come all. Come on in and get comfortable for a new season of Murder Church. We're coming up on season 6, the Charlie Adelson trial. Sit down, get a snack, tell a friend, give it a share, give it a like. Let's go.
Let's rock.
Yo, everybody, we've made it. We are back again. The green screen is back alive. What's up, everybody? Welcome in here. Thank you for coming through for the beginning of season 6. Believe it or not, I can't believe we've made it through season 5. First of all, after 16 months, Phil Spector's done. Out of here. Kaput. Dunsky. But you know, lo and behold, a season 6 is going to roll right on through, and I thought it'd be perfect. Again, I've been announcing this and hyping it up, and anybody in here right now probably knows that. But Donna Adelson's trial started today, jury selection, and I think they're kind of thinking about Friday for opening statements. Well, I thought it'd be the perfect time. Again, I can't really cover Donna the way I would like to because I work a regular job during the day. But for Murder Church and for the foreseeable future, we're going to do Charlie Adelson's 2023 trial. So yes, I did watch this off and on with Jay when he was doing it. So I'm not a complete novice on the Adelson drama, but at the same time, I'm learning as we go also. And I've been trying to cram a little bit extra, trying to figure some stuff out. And what I did do is I put together a timeline that we're going to go over here to begin the stream. And then we'll go into at least the state's opening statement. I can't promise that we're going to get both in. They're both about an hour or so each. And then we have a members only, of course, the book club immediately after. And I did get in chapters 32 and 33 of The Stranger Beside Me. So we'll be going straight into that immediately after the stream. And again, if you are maybe new here, just coming through, every Tuesday night after Murder Church, we have a book club. And currently we're reading The Stranger Beside Me, a book about Ted Bundy, written by Ann Rule, who worked with Ted Bundy once upon a time. And I'm not going to bore you with all of that, but please jump in there if you would like to. Member up here at Publicly Buzz. You get a lot of cool extras as well. But without further ado, let's check out the chat here. See who's coming through here tonight. True Crime Butterfly popping in. Adam Malone. I want to give Adam Malone a shout out because he is the curator of the music that you saw over that video opening this up for Murder Church this season. He also did the music for last season, and I don't remember if we started it into season 4 or not, but he's awesome. He's very talented, and I appreciate that, Adam. Thank you so much. Afton coming through here. Bluebird coming through here. And, of course, Sunday mornings, yes, we will continue to rock this trial now currently. Also, Jersey Jen coming through here. Hope you're doing good, Jen. Holly Berry's in the house. Carrie's in the house. Looks like we got the Buzz Nation rocking and rolling is what we got, which is what I like to see. So looking on up through here just a little bit more. Susan's hanging out. Susan, thank you so much. Back in a few, I've got this in Steve, a Cash App. Oh, shit. And speaking of that, while I'm on here and have it on my brain, Pammy came through at the very end. She was watching on the replay crew of the Phil Spector last episode, and she is so generous, so kind. Pammy's one of the coolest people I've met. She sent me $102 for 102 episodes of Phil Spector, and she is the newest person on the wheel, which we are still building towards. And of course, if we finish a wheel up today, we'll spin a wheel. That's one thing that we do here at the Buzz in the Buzz Nation and on Publicly Buzz. We like to give back to the community that gives to us. You can always get something cool here. And right now we are about eight in. So we're already a little bit more than halfway on getting that done. So, but Susan, I love you. Thank you very much. Ember coming in. What's up, Ember Burns? Hanging out. I hope you're doing well currently as well. Teresa's in the house. That's right. Let's get some beers in the chat. That's what I'd like to see. Looking through here real quick. Bassett Page, an absolute Murder Church OG. She loves her some Murder Church. So yeah, everybody coming through here. I really appreciate it, guys. So yeah, at the beginning here, I am going to start this out with a little bit of a timeline here. So bear with me as this goes through. And I would, like to say this isn't going to take up a lot of time here, but it kind of gets it up to date not only for Charlie Adelson, but also Donna Adelson as well. If anybody's also watching that in real time. But yeah, let's jump in here real quick. Boom! There we are. And I got Prison Charlie down there. You'll see Prison Charlie in the corner of the screen. Had to create a Prison Charlie. And I've also got another one as well. But look at that shiner. This guy's gotten in a bad fight apparently. Someone has kicked his ass. And he's not looking so good. But the timeline right here. Divorce of Dan Markel and Wendy Adelson. We'll start right here, 2006. Marriage. I'll go ahead and zoom in just a little bit there. Marriage. Dan Markel, a Florida State University professor, and Wendy Adelson, a lawyer and academic, married in 2006 and had 2 sons, Benjamin and Lincoln. Their marriage deteriorated, leading to a separation in 2012 and a finalization divorce in 2013. The finalization of the divorce in 2013. The divorce, 2012 to 2013 here. The divorce was bitter, with disputes over finances and child custody. Wendy sought to relocate to Miami with the children to be closer to her family, particularly her mother, Donna Adelson, and brother, Charlie Adelson, a periodontist. He was a dentist. Dan, also making about $3 million a year, and I believe, I might even have the stats in here, but the family itself is worth about $8.1 million. As you can imagine, that would come in handy if you are going to need anybody maybe killed in the future, maybe with a hit. All right, this right here is a hit story at the end of the day. And again, I'm jumping ahead just a little bit here. Dan opposed the relocation, citing his parental rights and the children's established life in Tallahassee. 2012 to 2014, custody battle. The custody dispute centered on Wendy's desire to move the children to Miami, where the Adelsons lived. Like I just said, Dan, a tenured professor, insisted on keeping the children in Tallahassee, leading to legal battles over parenting plans. Court documents indicate Wendy requested modifications to the custody agreement, which Dan contested. Custody battle, again, 2012 through 2014. Wendy changed the children's last names from Markel to Adelson without Dan's consent, as evidence of her intent to distance the children from their father. The custody battle fueled the Adelsons' animosity towards Dan, particularly Donna's, who viewed him as an obstacle to Wendy's happiness and the family's control over the grandchildren. Let's go down here a little bit further. Family tensions and Donna Adelson's role. 2012 to 2014, Donna's involvement. Donna Adelson, described as a domineering matriarch, was deeply involved in Wendy's life in the custody dispute. A July 2013 email from Donna to Wendy introduced during Charlie's trial, which we will see, urged Wendy to take control of the situation with Dan, suggesting a proactive approach to resolving the custody issue. 2012 to 2013, Charlie's role. Charlie Adelson, Wendy's brother, was close to both Wendy and Donna. As a wealthy periodontist earning $3 million annually, he had the financial means to influence the situation. Charlie began communicating with Catherine McBanawa, his ex-girlfriend, in 2013 about hiring hitmen, suggesting he was already planning a solution for the Dan problem. 2012 through 2014, Wendy's perspective. Wendy named an unindicted co-conspirator, claimed in court she was unaware of any murder plot. However, her actions, such as discussing Dan's opposition with her family and later driving past the crime scene on the day of the murder, raised suspicions. Again, anybody that's really familiar with this knows that Wendy has still never been arrested. She testified that her family, especially Donna, hated Dan for his stance on the custody issue. Zoom out here just a little bit more. Timeline. Key incidents indicating motive. Wendy's calendar entry. Trial testimony revealed Wendy had a calendar entry labeled Fix TV, which prosecutors suggested was a coded reference to planning Dan's murder. Wendy claimed it related to a broken television, but the entry's timing and deletion after the murder were suspicious. 2013-2014. Financial context. Charlie's wealth and the Adelson's family resources, again, like I said a minute ago, over $8.1 million in known bank accounts, were highlighted in court as enabling the murder for hire. Charlie allegedly paid $138,000 through McBanawa to hire Sigfrido Garcia and Luis Riviera, with payments starting in 2014. Donna's communications, 2013-2014. Wiretaps and emails from 2013 to 2014, later introduced in Charlie's trial, showed Donna discussing Dan's inflexibility with Wendy and Charlie, using veiled language that prosecutors interpreted as planning the murder. Murder of Dan Markel. 2014 details. On the morning of July 18th, 2014, Dan Markel of Florida State, again, university law professor, was shot twice in the head in the garage of his Benton Hills home in Tallahassee, Florida. Or excuse me, I don't think that was in Tallahassee, Florida. I might have had a misprint there. They were trying to get to Florida. The attack occurred around 10:50 a.m. as he returned from shipping. I've messed this one all up. The attack occurred around 10:50 a.m. as he returned from dropping his sons at daycare. Again, surveillance footage and witness accounts showed two men later identified as Sigfrido Garcia and Luis Riviera entering the neighborhood in a rented Toyota Corolla. Riviera, who pleaded guilty, testified that Garcia shot Markel at close range with a 9mm handgun. The hitman fled the scene, abandoning the car nearby. Significance of this, 2014 still here. The murder was a targeted hit executed with precision, suggesting a planned operation. The lack of robbery or personal motive initially pointed investigators toward a personal or familia, I'm butchering that, family dispute, later linked to the Adelson family's custody battle for Markel. Initial police investigation, 2014-2015. Tallahassee Police Department responded immediately, treating the case as a homicide. Early leads focused on Markel's professional life due to his status as a law professor, but no clear suspects emerged. The crime scene yielded limited evidence, though the abandoned car provided a breakthrough with fingerprints and DNA. Key evidence: the Toyota Corolla rented by Catherine McBanawa, Charlie's ex-girlfriend, linked the hitman to the crime. Phone records showed Garcia and Riviera in Tallahassee around the murder date, and cash payments later traced to Charlie were suspected, but not yet confirmed. Significance here, 2014-2015. The investigation stalled initially due to the lack of direct evidence tying the Adelsons to the hitman. Wendy Adelson's behavior, driving 9.5 miles past closer stores to a liquor store near the crime scene on the murder day, and asking police odd questions, raised suspicions, but wasn't pursued aggressively at first. FBI involvement in the bump operation with Donna. Details: August 5th, 2016. The FBI conducted an undercover sting operation targeting Donna Adelson. An agent posing as a blackmailer linked to the hitman approached her outside her Miami condo. The agent wearing, get a little closer on that one, that one's a little smaller. The agent wearing a recording device claimed the hitman who helped your family with this problem up north, referring to Markel's murderer, needed support. He handed Donna a news article about the murder with $5,000 written on it and a phone number written on it as well. Donna initially denied knowledge, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about," but later called the agent, maintaining her innocence while agreeing to discuss further. This prompted a flurry of incriminating phone calls between Donna, Charlie, and Catherine. Wiretaps captured Charlie and Donna using code words like TV to discuss the murder, with Donna suggesting they get out of town if pressured. Key evidence here: the wiretapped conversations recorded after the sting provided direct evidence of his involvement. McBanawa's role as the intermediary was confirmed in financial trails, such as the stapled $100 bills began to emerge. Significance here, the bump operation was a turning point, shifting the investigation from a cold case to a targeted probe of the Adelson family. It established Charlie as the mastermind and implicated Donna while also exposing McBanowa's connection to the hitman. Down here, arrest of hitman, October 2016. On May 26, 2016, Sigfrido Garcia was arrested in connection with the murder and possession of cocaine. Evidence included cell phone and GPS records placing Garcia in Tallahassee during the murder, surveillance footage of a Toyota Prius stalking Markel, and his presence at an ATM in Pembroke Pines wearing a white long-sleeve shirt matching a post-murder video. Garcia denied involvement, claiming he had never been to Tallahassee or worked with Luis Riviera. Garcia's arrest, supported by the Prius evidence and toll records, confirmed the hitman's role and began connecting dots to McBanowa as the intermediary. Details: Luis Riviera, the driver, was arrested shortly after Garcia and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. However, at the time of this arrest, he was already serving a 12-year federal prison sentence for unrelated charges. Riviera, under a plea deal, confessed to driving the car while Garcia shot Markel. He received a 19-year sentence in exchange for testifying against Garcia and others. Garcia was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy, later convicted in 2019 and sentenced to life without parole. Key evidence: Riviera's testimony detailed the hitman's recruitment by McBanowa, who promised $100,000 up front and more later. Phone records and the rental car evidence corroborated their presence in Tallahassee. Some more here. Catherine McBanowa, Charlie's ex, and the alleged intermediary, was arrested in Broward County on first-degree murder charges. Evidence included her rental of the Toyota Prius, phone records connecting her to Garcia and Riviera, and the Dulce Vita restaurant meeting, which is what Charlie met her the day after the bump happened with Donna, and also, of course, the phone call with Donna to Charlie trying to meet him the next day as well, where they discussed the murder and blackmail fears. Wiretaps from the sting operation further implicated her as the conduit for the payments. The arrest of Garcia and Riviera provided the first concrete links to McBanowa, setting the stage for the investigation to move up the chain to Charlie and the Adelsons. McBanowa's initial trial in 2019 ended in a mistrial, 10-2 for conviction, delaying her conviction until 2022, where she was convicted. So, yeah, that is kind of just a brief rundown of kind of where we're at here, going into the Charlie Adelson, again, the 2023 trial, and we're going to be opening up with the state's opening statements right now. And as we go over time, what we will be doing here, Daddy Short Nuts, is watching some of these other videos, such as that video with the bump, where the FBI agent actually bumps into Donna Adelson in the street and gives her the papers that we were talking about with the $5,000 on it, and trying to get her to basically reach out to Charlie, incriminate herself. We're also going to end up watching over time Wendy Adelson's video where it's an interrogation, essentially. I don't even know if we would call it an interrogation. Maybe it is an essential interrogation video, but it's like 3 or 4 hours long. Her right after the murders, acting very strange. I've actually seen that before. We'll be watching that as well. So we're going to be going over a lot of different things here as we go down this path. I appreciate everyone for being in here. And let me just make sure I'm not missing anything real quick. Thanks everyone for hanging out today. Out the gate, boom, True Crime Butterfly with $2. Thank you, True Crime Butterfly. That will get you right on here for a possibility of some goodies off the wheel. Thank you so much, True Crime Butterfly, who is the best, who is amazing. And I think I see Susan did come through here with a $20 holler for covering the Adelson's retrial. No, thank you, Susan. I appreciate it. Appreciate that. $20 getting you right on this wheel as well. I think we're only 2 away from a wheel. I have to do another recount, but that's incredible. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully everyone will enjoy this as we continue down the path. So, boom, it did. Thank you, Susan, so much. I appreciate that. Boom. There's so much. Yes, there's so much going on. Again, yeah, audio from the actual meeting with Charlie and Catherine. There's a lot to go over, though. And the name change. Yeah, can you believe her having the gumption or the gonads to change these children's last names like that? So yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of stuff that kind of grosses us out as we go through this. But again, thanks everyone for jumping in here. Let me set this up, and we're gonna start off right now with the state's opening statements.
Let's get right to it. The reason that we're here today is because the defendant in this case, Charlie.
Oh, Jen, before we do jump in here, gifting out a membership. Boom, Adam Malone can join the book club tonight. Hell yeah, Jen, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Boom, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you so much. Have the kindest folks here in the Buzz Nation.
Hired a hitman to kill his former brother-in-law, Dan Markel. This murder was set into motion because back in 2014, the defendant's family, the Adelson family, had a big problem. And that big problem was Dan Markel. And the solution to that problem was this defendant. This defendant was the solution to that problem because he had a girlfriend with connections to the type of people who were willing and capable of pointing a gun at a complete stranger and pulling the trigger. The victim in this case was known as Danny to his friends and family. He was a loving father to 2 little boys. He was a highly respected professor at Florida State College of Law. And tragically, on July 18th of 2014, Dan Markel was shot twice in the head in broad daylight in the driveway of his home in the Benton Hills neighborhood here in Tallahassee. The last day of Dan Markel's life that day began like any other of his mornings that summer. He woke up, he drove his 2 little boys to preschool and dropped them off, and then he drove over to the gym to work out. After finishing his workout, he returned home.
Hey, thanks for those shares, guys. Bassett Page, Bluebird.
Opened his garage, but little did he know that throughout his just normal routine that morning, he was being followed. He was being followed by 2 hired hitmen who traveled all the way from Miami to Tallahassee for the sole purpose of murdering him. And just like something out of a horror movie, he pulls into his driveway, and the car that, unknown to him, pulls in right behind him.
Thank you,
Moments
Jen.
later,
Welcome in.
Dan Markel,
Laylo Me. Welcome in here.
his neighbor, heard a gunshot. He looked out the window and he saw a light-colored Toyota Prius backing quickly out of Dan Markel's driveway and then speeding away.
That's a will.
The neighbor waited for a couple minutes to see if maybe Dan Markel came out of his house or backed out of his driveway too. And when nothing happened, this neighbor got that funny feeling that maybe something could be wrong here. So he walked over, and what he found was a gruesome scene. He walked in the garage and saw that the driver's side window of Dan Markel's car was shattered. He saw Dan Markel was still behind the wheel. He was alive, but he was moaning, he was unresponsive, and he was terribly injured. The neighbor then goes and calls 911.
Welcome in here.
Law enforcement arrives, and they find Dan Markel unresponsive with gunshot wounds to his head. He was then taken to the hospital where he survived for several hours before he was actually pronounced dead. Dan Markel was 41 years old, and his little boys that were deprived of their father that day were just 3 and 4 years old. Law enforcement immediately began to investigate to figure out who shot Dan Markel. And the evidence they find sets them down 2 separate paths. One path is that they had to track down that light-colored Prius that the neighbor saw fleeing from the crime scene and identify who was inside that Prius. And the other path relates to Dan Markel's personal life. They looked to see who...
Did I have the
if
car wrong
anybody,
in my notes there? It was a Prius. What was I saying? A Corolla? The fuck?
Dan Markel's personal life would
Sorry about
hate
that.
Dan Markel enough to kill him. And after years of tireless investigation by law enforcement, both of these two paths led directly to this defendant. So let's talk about the path involving Dan Markel's personal life first. In looking at who might have a motive to kill Dan Markel, law enforcement learned that Markel was entangled in a very nasty divorce with his ex-wife, who is the defendant's sister, and her name is Wendy Adelson. A review of their divorce case file revealed that Wendy Adelson asked the court to allow her to move back to Miami, where she was from, with the kids, in order to be near her parents, whose names are Harvey and Donna Adelson, and her brother, the defendant. Dan Markel was adamantly opposed to his children being relocated to Miami. He was a law professor here in Tallahassee. This is where he lived. This is where his kids have been raised. He wanted his kids to live here with him. And for this custody dispute, the judge ended up ruling in Dan Markel's favor. So Wendy Adelson was not permitted to move to Miami with the children. Unless, of course, something happened to Dan Markel. A review of Wendy Adelson's emails revealed that her mother, Donna Adelson, hated Dan Markel and was desperate to find a way for Wendy and her children, who were Donna Adelson's grandchildren, to be able to move to Miami. Donna Adelson suggests in these emails that y'all will hear about several ways that Wendy Adelson could threaten or bully Dan Markel into submission, into getting what she wanted him to do. Donna Adelson even suggested offering Dan Markel a $1 million bribe to allow the relocation, and even said that this defendant, Charlie Adelson, would pay a third of that $1 million bribe to Dan Markel to make that happen. The evidence in this case will show that Donna Adelson's closest confidant was her son, the defendant. She and the defendant talked multiple times a day, every day. He was the person with whom she would constantly vent and complain to about Wendy's situation. The defendant was also the person that Donna Adelson relied on to solve her problems. And this was a big, big problem for Donna Adelson. And she made it the defendant's problem to solve. So the divorce between Wendy Adelson and Dan Markel was final about a year before the actual murder. But that was not the end of that case. Litigation was ongoing, to say the least. Each side would continue to routinely file violations of the custody agreement, violations of the settlement agreement, and that continued right up until Dan Markel's death in July of 2014. This was a highly emotionally charged situation between them leading up to his death. However, there was no physical violence that Wendy Adelson needed to be rescued from or anything like that. But make no mistake, this was a very messy custody dispute. Shortly before the murder, in fact, Dan Markel, the victim.
Yeah, before we get any further, just Jay kind of mentioning this prosecutor here. Stephen Everett is the judge here. And from everything I've seen, he seems like a good judge. He seems cool. I don't know if he'll top Judge Dowhard. That's my favorite judge of all time. The prosecutors here, Georgia Chappelman. I think I'm saying that correctly. I do remember her. She's quite the feisty one and has been gunning for the Adelsons for quite a while. This right here, the one doing this opening statement, Sarah Dugan, I believe that's how you would say it. And the defense team for Charlie Adelson, Daniel Rashbaum, and then there's some other co-counsel as well, which I don't think we see much of them. Catherine Myers and Josh Dubin. as well. So, yeah, Jay, welcome in here, brother.
Filed with the court and basically asked the court, he alleged that Donna Adelson was disparaging him to his children by saying bad things about him. And he asked the court to enter an order preventing Donna Adelson from having unsupervised contact with her grandchildren. This motion was still pending in court when Dan Markel was killed. The murder of Dan Markel ensured that an adverse ruling on his motion would never be a problem for the Adelsons. And just about 48 hours after the shooting, Wendy Adelson and the little boys relocated to Miami. Shortly thereafter, moved into a home within walking distance of the Adelsons' Miami home. Within a year of Dan Markel's murder, Wendy Adelson legally changed Dan Markel's son's last name from Markel to Adelson, and just like that, their father was just effectively erased from their lives at 3 and 4. And the Adelsons family,
so young.
Their big problem had been solved. You'll hear during this trial that the Adelsons are a very tight-knit family. The defendant and his parents, Harvey and Donna Adelson, they actually even all worked together at the Adelson Institute, which was their family's dental practice. At the Adelson Institute, the defendant and Harvey Adelson were dentists, and Donna Adelson managed the office. After Dan Markel was killed on July 18, 2014, law enforcement interviewed Wendy Adelson. And Wendy Adelson acknowledged that her family had a motive to kill Dan Markel, or to want him dead. She admitted that her brother, the defendant, had even said that he looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel as a divorce present to her. But he decided to buy her a TV instead because it was cheaper. And coincidentally, or not, that TV that this defendant bought his sister as a divorce gift instead of hiring a hitman would be Wendy Adelson's alibi for the morning of the murder when the victim was killed by a hitman. So this path of looking into Dan Markel's life to see who would have a motive to want him dead leads law enforcement to the Adelsons, including this defendant, a man who told his family that he'd looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel. The defense asked yesterday in jury selection.
People talking in the chat a little bit about Wendy and how annoying she is. Just imagine how she feels right now, right after her brother, after the domino effect, after the hitmen go down, after McBanaway goes down, Charlie goes down, Donna's about to go down, trial starting literally today. She has to be thinking in the back of her head at any moment, they could be coming for me. And will they go for her after the Donna trial is the question here.
Who's talked trash or heard somebody talk trash about an in-law, which is not a rare concept. A lot of people don't like their in-laws. But the difference here is that the defendant's comment stopped being just a little bit of trash talk when Dan Markel was actually killed by a hitman. While the police are trying to investigate, who in Dan Markel's personal life may have a motive to kill him, they're simultaneously going down that second path I described to y'all, which was tracking down the vehicle that the neighbor saw fleeing the crime scene. When law enforcement retraced Dan Markel's steps the morning of the murder, they uncovered some chilling surveillance video of a Prius fitting the description of the one seen by the neighbor, following Dan Markel into the Premier Gym parking lot, waiting for an hour while he was inside, and then following him home from Premier Gym back to his neighborhood. They got these surveillance images from city buses, from Premier, from everywhere they possibly could. And these surveillance images, coupled with a massive amount of phone data and SunPass records gathered in this case helped police to eventually track down the exact car used in this crime. But police still had to figure out who was in the Prius and why did they kill Dan Markel. As part of this really painstaking review that law enforcement did of all of these records, and when I say painstaking, finding this Prius and finding all of this evidence and all of these records was not an easy task, and it took longer than your average investigation. It was very difficult to do. They combed through tons of phone records and even did what's called a tower dump, which is where law enforcement collected a list of all of the cell phone numbers that communicated with the cell tower that serviced different spots in Tallahassee that Dan Markel was at that morning, including Premier Gym, when the suspect's Prius were there. Because they thought if the person in the Prius was using their phone at the time, then their number will be somewhere in this tower dump. They combed through all of that data, and they found a number with a Miami area code belonging to a man named Sigfredo Garcia. Law enforcement examined all of Garcia's call logs and saw that he was in frequent contact with another number that was also present at Premier Gym that morning. And that number belonged to a man named Luis Rivera. Luis Rivera is a lifelong friend of Sigfredo Garcia and is also from Miami. Police then looked at all of Garcia and Rivera's phone records, which showed that their phones left Miami about 2 days before this murder, on July 16th of 2014. The phones came to Tallahassee, and on the day of the murder, July 18th, they followed Markel to Premier Gym. The phone data is consistent with both men turning off their phones just minutes before the murder and leaving their phones off until about an hour or so after the murder, when they're well on their way back towards Miami. And then a bank's ATM camera caught both Garcia and Rivera in that light-colored Prius once they arrived back in the Miami area when they stopped at an ATM.
Hell yeah, Jay. Thanks for that share. Adam, thanks for that share. Appreciate it, guys.
So,
Cacro, thank you for that new member. Jay membered up again.
police
Boom.
figured out the identity, and this should
Thank you,
appear on the
Cat Grow.
screens in front of you. The identity of the two men responsible for following and killing Dan Markel. Luis Rivera, his nickname is Tato, and Sigfredo Garcia, his nickname is Tudo. But they continued to look for evidence of why two seemingly random men came all the way to Tallahassee to kill a man, Dan Markel, that they'd never met. You know, what or who is the connection between these killers and the victim? Well, phone records reveal that one of Sigfredo Garcia's most frequent contacts was a woman named Catherine McManua. Her nickname is Katie.
Banawa. I've been practicing that name literally all day long. So I'm like, I know I'm going to screw that one all to hell. And I think I got it.
Garcia
Banawa.
and Catherine McManua have a long history of an on-again, off-again relationship over the course of many years, and they actually share 2 kids in common. And lo and behold, when looking at the phone records, Catherine McManua is also one of the most frequent contacts of this defendant, Charlie Adelson. Law enforcement learned that at the time of Dan Markel's murder, this defendant was dating.
Yeah, I it was actually from her trial, but somebody saying her name out loud, and I just kept replaying it randomly throughout my workday. I was like, I got this. McBanawa, McBanawa, McBanawa.
Catherine McManua. She was his girlfriend at the time. So Dan Markell was a problem that this defendant needed to solve for his family. The defendant was looking to hire a hitman to kill Dan Markell. Dan Markell ends up being killed by a hitman. And who ended up being the hitman? It was someone with a close relationship to this defendant's girlfriend. The hitman was the father of his girlfriend's children. So you can see how both leads in this case, followed by investigators, both of them charted paths to this defendant. Not only did looking into the motive lead law enforcement to the defendant because he wanted to hire someone to kill Dan Markell, but looking into the car, fleeing the scene.
Usually it is like a love. Usually it's like a husband-wife thing. If it's not like some sort of like bitter enemy or something along those lines, it usually is something close. But in this case, the husband, again, it's the husband, but getting your family to help kill the man who fathered your children, like the children that being a part of it is so horrific to think about. Little fucking children who are now like, oh, where's dad?
Also led law enforcement to the defendant through his girlfriend at the time. So 2 different investigations arriving at the same conclusion. Law enforcement also tried to follow the money in this case. And that was a third way that the evidence in this case points to this defendant. Law enforcement reviewed bank records, employment records, DHS-MV records of all of the suspects and saw that in the months after the homicide, Sigfredo Garcia, Luis Rivera, and Catherine Magbanua all acquired some big ticket items. Rivera and Garcia both bought motorcycles and cars. Catherine Magbanua got a breast augmentation surgery and later received a black Lexus sedan whose previous owner was Harvey Adelson. Catherine Magbanua's bank records were analyzed, and there was no check ever written or matching cash withdrawal for the car or the breast augmentation, which was paid for in cash. Bank records also showed that Catherine Magbanua's account had a huge spike in cash deposits right around the time of the murder. She deposited more money into her account in the 5 weeks following the murder than in the entire previous year before the murder. This was during a time when there was no record of her being employed anywhere. Also, about 2 months after the murder, the defendant added Catherine Magbanua to the payroll at the Adelson Institute. And she began receiving regular checks from their business account every 2 weeks for 2 years after the murder. And this was despite the fact that she did not work at the Adelson Institute. So, the money was talking, but what were the suspects saying? That's what law enforcement wanted to know. So, as they're examining the phone records in this case, they see a distinct pattern surrounding important events and dates in this case. The phone calls, and they can't see the content, they can't hear the content of these calls in these phone records, but they see that the calls are occurring. And the phone calls always went from Donna Adelson to the defendant, then from the defendant to Catherine Magbanua, then from Catherine Magbanua to Sigfredo Garcia, and back the other way. Kind of like train cars, they only touch the car right in front of them. Donna Adelson never calls Catherine Magbanua or Sigfredo Garcia. Charlie Adelson never calls Sigfredo Garcia, or vice versa. So, if this is a murder for hire, as law enforcement suspects, could it be that the defendant was wisely insulating himself from the actual shooters by having Catherine McBanois act as a middleman.
Banawa.
Law enforcement decided to launch an undercover investigation designed to clarify who the members of the conspiracy were and how information traveled within this conspiracy. So police applied for and received court authorization to listen in real time to the phone calls of the defendant and Catherine McBanois. And this is what's known as a wiretap. By this point, the point that the law enforcement received authorization to do this wiretap, it was April of 2016. So it's been not quite, but almost 2 years since the murder of Dan Markel, which occurred in July of 2014. So by April of 2016, the defendant and Catherine McBanois are no longer dating at that point. They've been broken up since the fall of 2014. Catherine McBanois is actually back together with Sigfredo Garcia, the father of her children, at that point. The defendant has moved on to many other girlfriends since Catherine McBanois, but the defendant and Catherine McBanois are still in regular communication and have remained very close friends since the murder. And Rivera, who was the second hitman in that Prius, he, in April of 2016, was actually in federal prison doing time on another charge unrelated to this murder. So all of the members of this conspiracy have presumably gone on with their lives, believing they've gotten away with this murder. So even though law enforcement has authority to listen to their calls now,
It has been so freaking long.
what reason would these people have to still be discussing the murder at this point? So police needed to stage an event that would generate conversation between the conspirators about the murder. And the plan was to send an undercover agent posing as somebody on behalf of Luis Rivera, who was incarcerated, to walk up to Donna Adelson on the street and try to extort money out of her. And law enforcement refers to this as the bump.
The bump.
So, this
It definitely
undercover
worked.
agent walks up to Donna
Got
Adelson
everyone
one day.
scurrying
She's leaving
around.
the Adelson Institute during the day. The undercover agent hands Donna Adelson a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper is an article about the murder of Dan Markel with his picture on it and, FSU professor killed. Also on the piece of paper are a phone number and the amount of $5,000. The undercover agent tells Donna Adelson that he knows that the Adelsons are taking care of Katie, and he's there to extort money out of her on Rivera's behalf in order to even things out. The undercover agent never says the defendant's name or anything about the defendant's involvement to Donna Adelson. Then law enforcement listens to see what will happen next. Will Donna Adelson go straight to the police to report this extortion attempt, or will something else entirely happen? As suspected, based on the previously observed communication pattern, the first person that Donna Adelson calls after the bump is the defendant. Despite the fact that the undercover agent never mentioned the defendant to her. On that first call, one would think that Donna Adelson would say to her son, it's so crazy, some man came up to me and he's handed me this article about Danny's murder, and he's
There's a cocaine joke in there somewhere.
it seems like he's demanding money from us. She never says any of that. In fact, she never says Dan Markel's name at all. Instead, she tells the defendant that she needs to talk to him in person, not over the phone, about some paperwork that was hand-delivered to her. She said that this paperwork, she says this to the defendant, it involves the two of us, and that he should know what she's talking about. She says that he should bring cash to their meeting, And she also says that this TV is about 5. Donna Adelson tells the defendant that the man who approached her mentioned an ex-girlfriend. Donna Adelson never says which ex-girlfriend she's referring to. She never says Catherine McBanois or Katie's name to the defendant in that phone call. She only says that the blackmailer mentioned an ex-girlfriend. The defendant never asks his mom, whose ex-girlfriend? My ex-girlfriend? Which ex-girlfriend? He never asked that. Because as the evidence will show, he didn't need to. He knew that this TV is about 5 meant that she was being blackmailed about Danny's murder for $5,000. And he knew that the ex-girlfriend in question was Catherine McBanois. And we know that because after this call with his mother, what does the defendant? The defendant calls Catherine McBanois. He doesn't call his most recent ex-girlfriend. He doesn't even call the most recent ex-girlfriend because before the most recent ex-girlfriend, the one before that. No, he calls Catherine McBanois. And his call to Catherine McBanois is the only call that he makes to any ex-girlfriend after getting the information from his mother that the blackmailer mentioned an ex-girlfriend. And he had not dated Catherine McBanois for 1.5 years at that point. And although the defendant threatens to do it often, neither he nor his mom ever report the matter to the police. The only people that he discusses it with in these calls is Donna Adelson and Catherine McBanois. And you'll hear these phone calls between the conspirators, and as you listen to these calls, y'all will notice that they are being cautious about what they say over the phone. It's very apparent that they are very careful with their words because they are immediately suspicious that law enforcement could be listening to their conversations.
Yeah, like even having any of the conversation they have on the phone is the silliest thing ever. Like, just shut up. Talk in person. Like, has no one seen The Sopranos?
So Donna Adelson calls the defendant, and the defendant's first call is to Catherine McBanois. After that, the defendant then meets up with his mom in person, like his mom requested. And his mom gives him this paperwork that the undercover agent gave her. Then next, the defendant and Catherine McBanois meet up in person. And they meet up at a restaurant in Miami called Dolce Vita. And while they sat at their table, in this Dolce Vita is a busy, noisy restaurant, an undercover FBI agent sat at a table nearby with a hidden camera in their bag and recorded this conversation. And in the recording, we hear the defendant discussing whether the man who walked up to his mom could be an undercover police officer or someone who's trying to blackmail them. And if it's the latter, if it's a blackmailer, is it somebody who's just trying to make a quick buck? Or is it somebody who actually knows information from the inside? The defendant reassures Catherine McBanois that if it is the police, that's a good thing. The defendant thinks that if it's the police, that means that they do not have enough evidence to charge anybody. In fact, the defendant tells her, if they had any evidence, we would have already gone to the airport. The defendant starts giving her some legal advice. He says that, hey, in order to prove that someone committed a crime, you have to be able to put the person at the scene of the crime at the time it was committed, which unfortunately for them is not an accurate statement of the law. It's important to note, too, at the time of this conversation at Dolce Vita, no arrests had been made. The only thing that police had released to the public was a photo of the Prius that fled the scene. This was the Prius that Garcia and Rivera rented and used the day of Dan Markel's murder. So police knew at that point that it was Garcia and Rivera who were in the Prius, but the public did not know that yet, and no arrests had been made because they wanted to do this undercover investigation. And so the fact that this photo of this Prius had been released to the public is interesting in light of some of the things that y'all will hear the defendant say to Catherine Magbanua in the Dolce Vita recording. He starts giving Catherine Magbanua several analogies, all involving rental cars used to commit crimes. He reassures her that, hey, if DNA is found in a car, all that means is that at one point the person sat in the car. And if that car was later used in a crime, police can't
Charlie Adelson thinks he's super smart, doesn't he?
prove that just from a person
Sitting there
DNA
as
being
the
in
defendant
car.
in this trial.
The defendant points out to her that if a rental car is found that was at a crime scene, police also have to prove who was driving it at the time. He gives her a very relevant hypothetical of her renting a car in Miami and someone asking to borrow it and driving to Orlando to commit a robbery, and how she would be innocent in that hypothetical because she wasn't in the car at the time of the robbery. So through these analogies, the defendant is reassuring Catherine Magbanua that even if police identify who rented the car that fled the scene, they still would not have enough evidence to hold anybody responsible for the murder, even if they did find out it was Garcia and Rivera. The defendant also says that crimes are tough to prove unless someone actually witnessed the suspect commit a crime, or a suspect makes a confession, or a suspect is caught on a wire talking about the crime. So the defendant's trying to reassure her about the lack of evidence. And hey, as long as we all stay quiet, then we don't have anything to worry about. At one point, the defendant asked her, let me ask you a question. And then he asked her about money. He says, when everybody was there the next day, did you take any money? Like, are any of you driving around in a Bentley? Or no, it's not like any of you are driving around in a Bentley or cruising around in a mega yacht. So here the defendant's pointing out that the money wasn't used to buy anything flashy that would draw the attention of the police. And when discussing, and you all will hear during the course of this trial why his statement or his question about the money from the next day is particularly important. The evidence will show that Catherine Magbanua went to the defendant's home the night of the murder, where he paid her in cash. And the next day, Catherine Magbanua paid Garcia and Rivera their cuts of the money. When discussing the possibility of whether this is actually some gangster trying to blackmail his family for money, the defendant says that whoever this person is, whoever it is, knows information. The defendant told Catherine Magbanua that there are two ways of dealing with this guy. They could call the police, but then the guy blackmailing them would be charged with trying to blackmail his family. And the blackmailer would start talking, and he would start calling out Catherine Magbanua's name. And then police are going to be asking questions about what happened. The other option is to pay the blackmailer, but let him know that this is a one-time thing, and try to scare the blackmailer off by saying, hey, if you come around again, we're going to the police. So
Susan, I see you sent another $20. I don't know if it got hung up there and you didn't know if I got the first one, but I got another $20 through Cash App. And it says Adelson retrial. Thank you so much.
The defendant then gives Catherine Magbanua very precise instructions. He wants her to call the blackmailer and tell him that, this is
really appreciate that,
what
Susan.
he wants Catherine Magbanua to say. My friends, meaning the Adelson family, have no idea what you're talking about. And I don't have any idea what you're talking about either. But the name of the person who you said is incarcerated sounds familiar. So I'm going to give you this money as charity to help the less fortunate. But don't contact these people again, or they're going to go to the police. And the defendant said he would give Catherine McBanaway the $5,000 to pay off the blackmailer, except he's concerned, though, that this won't resolve the issue for good. The defendant is worried that this guy is not going to go away, that he's going to keep coming back for more and more money. And the defendant offers a solution to have this blackmailer killed, and he says he's willing to pay whatever it takes. The defendant tells her that, this is the defendant talking to Catherine McBanaway, this guy, meaning the blackmailer, is effing with him and his wife. And you better kill him or he's going to be a big problem because he knows who you are. And the defendant then says, if he can't handle this, I'll have somebody else do it.
Whoa.
The defendant says,
Question here is, has these fuckfaces ever killed anyone else that's been a slight problem in life for them? I mean, what the fuck, dude?
If they fuck with my family, it's going to be Nazi shit, because this will be done. I mean, Katie, I don't care what I spend. It's important to note, during this conversation in the entire wiretap, the defendant never says Sigfredo Garcia's name. But the evidence will show that the defendant was talking about Sigfredo Garcia when the defendant says that the blackmailer was effing with him and his wife. And if he can't do it, I'll find someone else who will. Because immediately after that, the defendant checks with Catherine McBanaway to make sure that Garcia has no hard feelings towards him, no reason not to help him. He says, hey, I have you on salary. You think he'd be happy about that? And he also says, I mean, our paths never crossed, meaning, hey, Garcia wasn't in the picture when he and Catherine McBanaway were together. There wasn't any overlap. After hearing that the defendant wants someone killed and is willing to pay whatever it takes to get it done, Catherine McBanaway then asks the defendant to help her out. And the defendant reassures her that she'll be taken care of by saying, he says, I don't have to. Sometimes those chairs can be a little wobbly. I know this is taking a bit, but I'm almost done. Thank y'all for being patient. All right, so she asked him to help her out. And the defendant reassured.
Actually, when I was on jury duty a couple of weeks back, there was like one chair that, like, all the chairs are just fastened to the floor with bolts or screws or whatever. And one of them was like wobbly. Luckily not mine, but I was like, man, if I was in that, I would not be able to stop fucking moving.
Assures her that she'll be taken care of. He says he doesn't have to tell her the things that he'll do for her. He shows her what he'll do for her. She doesn't have to ask him for anything. He looks for things to do. He says, hey, when someone's birthday's coming up or there's car problems, she doesn't have to ask. He looks for ways to help. And after his meeting with Catherine McBanaway, the defendant immediately calls Donna Adelson to let her know that everything's fine. And he does this using some pretty obvious code words, which y'all will hear, and you'll hear the conspirators often use words to mask the meaning of what they're actually talking about. Catherine McBanaway then, also using these code words, tasked Garcia with calling the number on the paperwork and finding out if a blackmailer is a legitimate associate of Rivera or not. And in the series of recorded calls that follow, you guys are going to hear these conspirators talking and using words like TV, false leads, listings, properties, clients, rap songs, CDs, popcorn pigs, relationship advice, all these different terms that are normal terms any of us may use, but they're used in context in these calls that, if you're listening to the conversation, do not make any sense. For example, in the calls, the defendant and Catherine McBanaway don't outright debate the pros and cons of whether they should pay this blackmailer. Instead, they talk about the fact that this property is cheap. They might expect a property like this to even be $1 million. This property seems like a great deal, but if you get the wrong tenant in there, the tenant may keep increasing the rent, and that tenant may become a leech that never leaves you. So it will be up to y'all to
That's why you
decide
got to murder them.
whether this defendant is actually worried
He's just
about
out here
a future
playing
tenant
God, bro.
of a property that might raise the rent and pay him more money, or if the defendant is actually worried that if he pays off the blackmailer, then the blackmailer may continue to come back again and again, or send a cousin or a friend to become a leech that never leaves him, that he can't get rid of. In another of these calls, the defendant tells Catherine McBanois that whoever this person is, this blackmailer is, he's got a lot of effing details. And in another, they discuss the fact that this blackmailer is not from the inside. And the defendant says that this guy is probably not from the first layer, but the second layer. So not someone who got info from Garcia, but maybe somebody who got info from Rivera. But one fact, and let me just say,
Paranoia really set the wheels off for Charlie.
as the jury, you all will interpret
And willing to just
and
end
decide
another
what
life.
they're really talking about in these calls.
Just
Only
like that.
y'all can determine the meaning and the weight to give this evidence, and only you can separate just mere coincidences from evidence in a conspiracy. But one fact, though, is really clear throughout these calls, is that all of these conspirators are hopeful that this blackmailer is law enforcement just trying to get information, because they think if it's law enforcement and the police don't have enough to bring charges, just fishing for information versus the other possibility, which would obviously be much worse for them, that the Adelsons are being blackmailed by somebody who actually knows inside information about their roles in Dan Markel's murder and may tell the police what they know. So, after this undercover operation, which was in 2016, Luis Rivera, Sigfredo Garcia, and Catherine McBanois are arrested. They're charged with the same charges before y'all in this trial. And Luis Rivera ended up cutting a deal with the state to tell law enforcement the truth about the murder of Dan Markel and the people responsible. Rivera told law enforcement that he was hired by Sigfredo Garcia to help kill Dan Markel. And Rivera described how Garcia told him that Catherine McBanois, the mother of Garcia's children, secured this job for them. And the job was in Tallahassee, and it paid $100,000, with Rivera's being about a third of it, $35,000. Rivera explained that he and Garcia actually made 2 trips to Tallahassee with the intent of killing Dan Markel. The first one was a month before the murder. It was in June of 2014. And the second was when Dan Markel was actually killed in July of 2014. Rivera said that he bought a gun off the street for that second trip, and Garcia rented a car. For the June trip. Rivera bought a gun off the street, and Garcia rented the car for that trip. Garcia and Rivera did some scouting on that trip of Dan Markel's residence, some surveillance, but ultimately couldn't get the job done. They ended heading back to Miami. During the trip to Tallahassee, he said that Garcia had a piece of paper with a picture of the man that they were supposed to kill on it, and some handwritten notes as well. Cell phone records corroborated Rivera's information about the June trip. Rivera also told a story about an incident in Tallahassee where he and Garcia were riding down the road in the rented Prius, and Garcia accidentally discharged the murder weapon, and the bullet struck the floorboard of the Prius. Law enforcement tracked down that actual Prius again and were able to see evidence in the undercarriage that corroborated Rivera's information about the accidental discharge. So they're looking at the phone evidence, they're trying to find whatever they can to kind of corroborate what he's telling them. I mentioned earlier that both men, Garcia and Rivera, cut their phones off from the time that they left Premier and kept them off until well after the murder when they're on their way back home. Rivera said that the first call that either of them made after the homicide was from Garcia to Magbanois, where Garcia told her that the job was done, and Magbanois assured them that they would get their money the next day, which they did. Rivera says when Catherine Magbanois brought cash to him at his home. And all this information that Luis Rivera provided them was corroborated by, including when the money was dropped off, was corroborated by cell phone records in this case.
God.
Well,
The amount of evidence between cell phone records, wiretaps, so much self-incriminating stuff, dude. The evidence is powerful.
Rivera told police that the next day after the
Me too,
murder,
Missy.
he was
So
paid
happy
in
it feels
cash
done.
by Catherine Magbanois, and that the money was packaged in a very unusual way. The money was in stacks of $100 bills, and the money was stapled together. The stacks of 100s, every $1,000 was stapled together.
That is crazy.
During this trial, y'all will hear that the defendant
staples
had
money
access
together?
to a lot of cash. And nothing's wrong with that. He had a lot of cash because his family gives cash discounts at their dental practice. And he keeps the cash that he receives in a safe. Again, nothing wrong about that either. However, what is relevant in this case is that the defendant had a very unusual practice of keeping the cash in his safe in $1,000 stacks of $100 bills that were stapled together, just like the money Luis Rivera received. Over the last few years, since the 2016 arrest and interview of Luis Rivera, law enforcement has not stopped working on this case. There were trials in 2019 and 2022, so right before the pandemic and right after the pandemic, of co-conspirators. Law enforcement also continued to try to gather all the evidence that they possibly could. They continued to interview people who may possibly have any information about the case. They tried to clarify any audio recordings that couldn't be clearly heard. While the phone wiretaps are very clear, the wiretap conversations that took place in public places when these people were meeting in person were not clearly audible back in 2016. Some still aren't. But because these public places are often too noisy. For instance, the recording of the conversation between the defendant and Catherine Magbanois at Dolce Vita had too much background noise to be able to clearly hear what the conspirators were talking about. However, since 2016, as technology developed over the years, and thanks to law enforcement's just continued dedication, law enforcement eventually found an expert that was formerly employed by the CIA with improved technology and enough expertise to clarify this recording at Dolce Vita that y'all will hear. And he did that by being able to reduce as much background noise as possible. And once this recording was clarified, which was actually just early last year in 2022, the state arrested this defendant. The presentation of this evidence, as y'all can see from opening, it's a lot. It's a lot of information. It's going to take a little bit of time. And it may be tedious at times. And I want to thank y'all in advance for the careful attention to all of the evidence y'all see and hear during this trial. When you'll see that this defendant carried out his plan to hire a hitman to kill Dan Markel. He conspired and he solicited Catherine Magbanois to get this murder done. And he paid her for the job once it was completed. This defendant acted in furtherance of this murder plot that went beyond just thinking about it or talking about it. And these acts make him guilty as a principal to first-degree murder, just as if he pulled the trigger himself. While the defendant's choices helped solve a problem within his family, they came at a very high price. He took the life of a loving father of 2 little boys, and he caused a lifetime of grief for Dan Markel's loved ones. Y'all heard a lot in jury selection about how important this trial is to the defendant, which I'm sure it is. But Dan Markel was loved. He was a brother. He was a son. And this trial is his family's opportunity to see justice done for the person who set up their son's murder. And at the conclusion of this evidence, y'all will be convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty. And at that point, we'll ask you for the only verdict that does justice in this case, which is a verdict that the defendant is guilty as charged. Thank y'all.
A pretty powerful opening statement. So I do want to give a shout out to the Trial channel. I'm using their playlist to get through this. And yeah, it looks like there's 30 videos in here. And next we'll be going into the defense's opening statement the next time that we are live with Murder Church, the Charlie Adelson trial. I'm not going to go into this tonight. We will go into this probably Thursday, unless I drum up something else for that show, but most likely we'll do this. We'll probably hang out with this for a little while. And especially on Sunday mornings and Tuesdays. But Thursdays, you never know. But still, probably go ahead and do the defense's opening for that day. But yeah, this is going to be a very interesting one to move forward with. Again, Donna's is starting up today with jury selection. And this is one that I did, again, watch in real time with Jay, who was in the chat here earlier. But I didn't get to fully immerse myself in it because, again, I'm at work most of the time. So it's hard. So this will be cool to actually be able to really, be able to take it all in, the entire trial. I'm excited about it. But everybody came through here tonight. Thank you all so much. First of all, we got a wheel to spin before we head over to the book club, which we are about to do momentarily, where we are going over chapters 33 and 34 of The Stranger Beside Me. But good luck, everybody, right here. We've got a lot of beautiful people on this wheel. Let me turn off the green screen. I'm not used to that yet. It's been a while since I used the green screen. I set it back up yesterday. I'm like, man, I want to get a little bit of a different feel for this one. So we're going to go old school here. Good luck, everyone. Jen pulling it off. Jen had 3 in a row there, too. Congratulations, Jen, who is always coming through and being fucking amazing. Jen, thank you so much. Winning the Hell Yeah Magnet, the Murder Church Magnet, the Publicly Buzzed Coaster, and a Publicly Buzzed Classic Pink sticker. Jen, thank you so much for always being so freaking cool and amazing. Let me get you in the winner circle here. And yeah, we got had a lot of winners here recently because you guys have been so freaking kind. Can't thank the Buzz Nation enough for continuing to keep this thing rolling, keeping it going. We don't mess around. But for anybody that is not in the book club or doesn't know about the book club, the only way to get in there is if you are a member here in the Buzz Nation. So that's where we're about to go right now. Again, members only. Yeah, the magnets are actually sweet. The magnets are badass. Like, they're super freaking cool. Got some on my fridge upstairs. Those are super cool. Need to get another wave of magnet. Maybe a Dandy Savage magnet, huh? Maybe a Dandy Savage magnet. And that's right. Anybody that's wondering what the numbers are beside your names, that is the active. Who has the most active in chat? So right now, Holly Berry's number 2. Adam Malone is number 3. And I'm scrolling back up to see who number 1 is. Number 1 hasn't talked in a minute, so that one's up for grabs. It looks like number 1 was True Crime Butterfly earlier. Probably still holding that. Bluebird had that one on Sunday and also won a wheel on Sunday. But the book club, we're coming through right now, you fine folks. I appreciate everyone for coming through here. Again, we will continue this, and we will probably most likely do Defense's opening on Thursday evening at 8 p.m. One cool thing I would announce right now, if I haven't said it already, Feral Friday this week, I've got Mo from Mo in the Deep End returning once again. And anybody that watched Mo on here a couple of weeks back when we went over some of the Koberger stuff and some Lori Vallow stuff, because she had been covering that. We kind of talked a little bit just kind of true crime in general. That was a fun show. I always enjoy having Mo on. But she compared Lori Vallow to Hatchet Face from the movie Crybaby with Johnny Depp. And we're going to be watching Crybaby, John Waters movie. Big John Waters fan also. John Waters is an absolute maniac. And I love that dude. Crybaby is going down on Friday. So if you've never seen Crybaby, prepare for a weird fucking movie and experience. It's one of his most coherent and best, actually. It's really good. And we're going to have Mo from Mo in the Deep End on here again for a Feral Friday party. It's going to be good. It's going to be fun. She's hilarious also. She's out of her mind. She's fucking funny as shit. Fits right in here with the Buzz Nation, I think, because we take the piss out of most stuff. All right? That's one thing that we do. We do. Did he just say do? See, it's already happening. Then the week after that, I've already got a Feral Friday planned out also, and it's going to be a doozy. Dandy Savage, Chris Duet. Again, the funniest shows are with all three of us, I think. We go wild on those shows. There's no rules. It's not exactly PC either. We go pretty nutty, and we are going to be having a wrestling night. We're going to watch Ready to Rumble, the wrestling movie with David Arquette. We're going to watch David Arquette win his first WCW World Heavyweight Championship. And then we're going to watch David Arquette about 20 years later faces a guy by the name of Nick Gage in a death match where he gets cut on his neck by a light tube and thinks he's bleeding out. It's going to be a wild night, so prepare for that also. Got a lot of cool stuff happening. Before all of that, Thursday night come through. And before all of that, right now, Book Club, Buzz Nation presents. Only way to see it is if you are membered up, my fine folks, my beautiful people. I love you guys, seriously. It's been fun. It's been a good one. It's gonna be good, yeah. Yeah, and just keep on keeping an eye out for everything on X, for sure. But other than that, my normal schedule will be nothing unchanged, basically. Sunday mornings we're still going to be starting between 9 and 10. I've been pushing that out, but I try to get back in here at 9, and we'll do multiple hours of this trial on Sundays, and it will not last nearly as freaking long as Phil Spector, I promise. That it's just impossible. That's not going to happen. I saw somebody in the chat here say Charlie Adelson's trial real time was 8 days. All right, that's a week. All right, it may take us a month or two to get through it, but it isn't going to take us 16 months to get through it. So, all right, come on through right now to the book club. I'll see you there in 2 and 2. Let's go.
This verse